Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen. So, come on through, Tyson. How, when did you do that?
That song, I wrote that in 2015. It was
Wow.
probably around maybe July or August. Matter of fact, yeah, I think it was coming into August of 2015.
Uh,
And the first verse that came first. So for me, my writing process goes like this. I will I freestyle because I'm from San Jose. I'm from the east side of San Jose. So when I was coming up and I was being introduced to hip hop, nobody knew about writing raps. Everything was improvisational, which is from the tradition of jazz and just so much from our tradition in general. So it was all spontaneous. So I was freestyle all the time. And I remember when somebody was like, "Hey, you should write a rap." I'm like, "You can write a rap." But people actually sit down and write. Okay. And I tried that. So then I started to learn that skill. But for me, the easiest way for me to like tap into that creative vibe is to improvise. So we're in the studio, my homeboy threw on that beat and it had that sample trying to carry on tradition. So I'm just like building off that. So then I start freestyling the first couple of lines of the first verse, which is we on mission trying to carry on tradition. I know the government listen, fighting for extradition. So that was all freestyle. I'm like, ooh, okay, I'm feeling it. So then I started writing. And that whole first verse is about the political revolutionary tradition that we come from. That's why there's a lot of references that come directly from the Black experience. And then after I finished that verse, I was like, I want to write a second verse. But in the second verse, I want to speak more to the global historical tradition. So there's a lot of scientific, there's some metaphysical stuff, there's a lot of religious references, there are multiple historical references from different peoples throughout time and place. And that one right there is the second. I'm proud of both. I'm proud of the entire song. I'm proud of the first verse, but the second
mhm,
verse I'm really, really proud of because I think
mhm.
it encapsulates so much. And I use it in a lot of my workshops and like in my teaching spaces because it's a way to bring so many people from different parts of the world together because there's references to who they are in I think a very meaningful and purposeful way.
Alhamdulillah, that's excellent. Who's the first voice that opens up on there?
The first voice is from the film Spook Who Sat by the Door.
Oh, okay, okay. I never
Yes.
saw the film. I did read the book actually,
Yeah.
but I never saw the film. Okay, that's
Yeah.
that's that's great. That's rich. That's rich. All right.
Right on.
Well, look like you're on the road. So you
Yeah.
still
Well, I'm headed to Stanford. I'm doing a presentation for these public defenders. I work with juvenile morning and then headed back to Oakland for another.
all right. So you good to go?
Yeah, I'm good to go, ready to go.
All right, it's all yours.
All right, I'll jump into it. All right.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu warahmatullah. Bismillah. Um, this is today's it's a very good day for carry on tradition to reflect on the book because and I'll be brief because I know Imam Fahim he said yesterday during Juma that he's gonna in a session a little bit earlier. So we'll just go a little bit into the tradition of Marcus Garvey. So now where we are in the book, we've covered probably 75, almost 80% of the book. From here, we go Marcus Garvey. From Marcus Garvey, we go into the tradition of the Nation of Islam. There's a portion where we focus on Malcolm within that story. Then we leave that, we go to the Black Panther Party. And then the very last section of the book focuses on our ancestor, Amilcar Cabral. And that's how the book ends. So we got 4 sessions total, or not 4 sessions total, but 4 sections left in the book. So the tradition of Marcus Garvey, and this is also a transition point for us for those who've had an opportunity to see the book or some of the stuff that I've presented thus far. Everybody else that we've looked at, we actually don't know. Well, for the most part, we don't know how they looked. We know how what Harriet Tubman looked like because we actually have photographs of Harriet Tubman. But some of the other historical figures that we discussed, we don't have photographs of them. We don't have actual depictions of them that are authentic. So that's why the AI technology that I've been using has been great, because it gives us that historical reimagining of what they might have looked like and what their world might have looked like as well. Now we're getting to people, we know what Garvey looked like. We know what the brothers and the sisters in the nation look like, because that was y'all. You know what I'm saying? I was right there with uh, these brothers and sisters that we're going to be talking about. We know what the brothers and sisters in the Black Panther Party look like. And, we know what the brother Amilcar Cabral looked like. So it was a different process using the AI tool Runway. I had to, quote unquote, train it to create images that represented the likeness of these people that we really know very well, what they look like, what they sounded like, what they did. And so I hope that you see that, but then I'll also try to create it in a way where we could tell, oh yeah, this isn't a real image from that time. Because I don't want people to mistake this and be like, oh, this is an actual photo of Garvey, or this is an actual photo of Malcolm, or of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, or whoever. So the traditional Marcus Garvey, we'll get into that. This is an image that I created, and I did this to depict Garvey younger, when he was making his journey from Jamaica to the United States. So this is me saying, this is Garvey on that boat ride coming across from Jamaica to the US. He had already created the UNIA, Universal Negro Improvement Association, in Jamaica. At this time, he had already had communications with Booker T. Washington. They exchanged letters in 1914, 1915. And he was coming to the United States to bring the UNIA to the US because he wanted to continue this beautiful, proud, revolutionary tradition of Black activism and Black leadership. So this is him on that boat before he gets here, before he establishes the UNIA in Harlem and begins building up what we know to be the UNIA and the legacy of it. So that's that. This is young Garvey right here. And what I'll do, I'm going to step back from this. Well, I'll show you the next picture too, but we'll probably talk about this more next time. So this is Garvey deeper into the UNIA and its growth here in the United States and globally, but having its base here in the United States. But I'm going to step back because I really want to talk about the relationship between Garvey and Booker T. Washington, because I think it's really important. So this comes from some slides that I use with my students in my Black program. So I have a program that's in a lot of schools, 23, 24 school year. So last school year, we had more than 1,000 Black kids in the schools. And this is from a presentation that I do on our brother El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, on Malcolm X. So before we talk about anything in the history of Malcolm, we talk about how he became who he became. And so in order to do that, we got to talk about his family. We got to talk about his parents. We got to talk about the community that raised him. So his parents were members of the UNIA. So we got to talk about the UNIA. And Malcolm would describe having memories of Garvey being in his home talking to his mother and his father because they were high-ranking members within the UNIA. So if we're going to talk about Garvey, we got to talk about Booker T. Washington. So before the story of Malcolm begins, we go into a history of Booker T. Washington. We go into a history of Garvey. We go into a history of Malcolm's father, Malcolm's mother. We talk about Sister Betty as well. Then we get into Malcolm. So this comes from that presentation. So look for me in the whirlwind is something that Garvey would say. We give the whole context of that quote. Then we just get into a little bit of his biography. So he was born August 17, 1887, St. Anne's Bay, Jamaica. And that's a point that I really emphasize because we got young brothers and sisters that are in that program that come from all over we could probably park over here, bro. All over the diaspora. And it's important for us to see that, not just to be stuck in what we may, if we come from Haiti or if we come from Jamaica or we come from the US, we got to be able to see our people globally. And we've been able to make an impact that way when we're not limited by the geographic boundaries that we might put on ourselves or that are forced on us in the places that we grow up in. So I emphasize the fact that he came from Jamaica and then he moved to the US. And then another reason why I emphasize that is what the US government did to him because they feared the power of Garvey and the UNIA. They deported him because he wasn't a US citizen. Right. So we talk about his upbringing. Then after that, we get into some of the early things that he did to learn some skills that he would use in the UNIA. And then we get into his founding of the UNIA in 1914 in Jamaica. So that's down here at the bottom of this slide. And then in 1915, he begins corresponding with Booker T. Washington. So Booker T. Washington, Up from Slavery, title of his autobiography. And, you know, establishing Tuskegee, but more importantly, the methodology of the Tuskegee machine. We do for self. We don't have to be dependent on anybody else. We need a school, we're gonna build a school. We need furniture in that school, we're gonna create that furniture ourselves. We need uniforms that we're gonna wear, we're gonna make those. We need food, we're gonna grow our own food. We're gonna buy land, we're gonna, all of that sounds so familiar because of course it becomes part of the blueprint of the UNIA, which eventually becomes part of the blueprint of the Nation of Islam, which is still part of the blueprint of our community. So he's inspired by that example, even though he's in Jamaica. And we know they know Zoom like we on right now. Back then, they know Facebook, Instagram, no phones like this. So he's getting information in a completely different way, but it was so transformative. The example of Booker T. Washington and the brothers and sisters that were part of the Tuskegee machine, that he felt it all the way on the island of Jamaica. So he reaches out. He's like to his elder, Booker T. Washington, and I'm a young man, I got this organization, and I want to really do what I can on behalf of our people. Booker T responds, sends a letter back. Garvey gets that, reads it, gets some advice from his elder, and then he responds back. So they have this correspondence, which is really, really powerful. And I think it's just a beautiful way that it also speaks to this tradition of carry on tradition, because every generation has to do their part and then they pass it on to the next generation. So this is a clear representation of it being passed to the next generation. So then Booker T. Washington passes away in 1915. Garvey comes to the US shortly after that. So that's where that picture is. And then once he gets to the US, and I'll just take us through this parts of this slide right here, and then I'll fall back because I know Imam Fahim needs the time to take us through what he's going to be taking us through. So he comes to the US 1915, 1916, and then begins building the foundation for the UNIA. And so much of the culture, the approach of the UNIA, we see in the early years, and not just that, like a through line in the Nation of Islam, because it was such a powerful formula and blueprint. Going back to Booker T. Washington and the Tuskegee machine, then what Garvey was able to do with it. And why Garvey and the UNIA are featured in Carry On Tradition is because one of the main components of the UNIA, they built out a wing called the African Legion. So if something popped off, they have brothers who were trained. They were trained in self-defense. They were trained with weapons, and they would be able to protect the Black community in the event of any attack. And we know that our community was being attacked all throughout. I mean, 1919, they talk about the Red Summer of 1919. We have so many instances of racial violence being visited upon Black folks all throughout this country. We had to be on our guard, on our square, in order to protect our folks. And so within the programming of the UNIA, we got to have brothers who are trained. We got to have sisters who are trained, who know how to protect ourselves, who can protect our community in the event of anything, especially in the event of attack. So that's part of the reason why I put them in here, because everybody else, we have clear examples of how these brothers and sisters stood up in order to protect themselves, their family, and their community. UNIA was built that same way. And then, of course, we see that in the Nation of Islam with the Fruit of Islam. And some of you who are on here were in the FOI. You know what I'm saying? That's part of the example that was set for me in my generation. As I'm coming up, I'm like, I'm seeing these powerful brothers and these sisters, you know what I'm saying? Like, they solid, they train, they ready to go. And we know we stay on post, we stay on our mission. So the the growth and the expansion of the UNIA after he gets here. He travels across the country. He's talking to folks. He's preaching. People are hearing about his message, and then members start coming into the UNIA. And early on, and this is where I'll start wrapping up, 1918, 1919, 1920, the UNIA has so many members. I mean, there's no exact count of how many members we had, but there are some folks who say that at the height of the UNIA, there was somewhere between 3 million to 6 million folks in the UNIA globally. And who's at the head of that? This brother, the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, with a vision for Black people, not just in the US, in the Caribbean, Central America, South America, globally. And there are some things that when we look at how he was viewing the world, there were some things that he was incorrect on. You know, this idea that brothers and sisters here in the Western Hemisphere, we had a better understanding of how the African continent should be utilized. That's something that we got to be clear on. Like he was wrong in certain aspects of his vision or his perspective, but then there are other things that he was 100% correct on. And being able to bring our people together under the banner of a powerful message that was for Black people was so important and so necessary. And the legacy lives on. So I'm going to stop here. When we come back next week, I'm going to go a little bit deeper into Garvey and using more of the book Carry On Tradition for us to see those images, to see the growth and the development, the expansion of the philosophy of the programming and all that. But I just wanted to set this foundation, and in this foundation, really highlight that connection between the previous generation, Booker T. Washington, the beautiful interaction that they had, and how that inspired Garvey, and then Garvey, as he steps into, you know, his prominence and his leadership, how he just carried that tradition on. And then, of course, the impact of that on future generations, which we're feeling all the way into this present moment. So I appreciate it, Imam Fahim. Thank you again for letting me share a little bit, and I look forward to the rest of the presentation.
Hold on. Mashallah, I got so enthralled with Tyson's presentation. I was supposed to be doing some behind the scenes setup for this part of my presentation. And so some kind of off on it. Hey, so what I'm going to do, let me see if I can get this thing set up in just a couple of minutes. So why don't we do this? Let's play that theme song again for you all to think about and listen deeply while I, in the background, get set up the way I want to. Okay? What happens in an underground organization when the first and second in command are either killed or captured? I'm here to Garvey Jones for this. We got it. Garvey Jones for this. Man, listen, we don't listen, trying to carry on tradition. I know the government listening, writing for expedition. They wishing my right to the First Amendment be presented when I'm penning these lyrics to brothers and sisters and tenements. Hear it like in the mirror. It's off the feelings and violent, marching down the block. It's all the parents in the flesh, but it's back in time. It's red, black, and green on the crest. Black dog mom, who's been impressed because they've been obsessed trying to suppress this intellect. And host after architects, they building. I'm on my Benjamin, banning concluded, Adam, like giving them like the reason they mad as a state of urban, the shadow while we're shining, immaculate clean with envy because they can't manufacture it. Got that African continent on my amulet, beat colorful blood rat like Jesus and that with every revolution leading the catalyst from the packages. Who step by the door, the protagonist moving like I'm Sam Green, Lee, and Hooper Teeth while these uncles I'm perfect sipping their green tea. In these these mean streets. The police just wanna fix. He just pulls up his feet. His handkerchief is like dinner reserved. This pure bone appetite. The judges, the police, the government on the sneak. The saga never ceased. The cycle on repeat. The enemy on the creep. The torch was past the beat. I'm trying to carry on tradition for my peoples to be free. Trying to get me on tradition. The proper insight, the God is trying to carry on tradition. The proper insight, the God is trying to carry on tradition. The proper insight, the God is trying to carry on tradition. Prepare your mind for expansion. Keep fathom. Go from atoms to atom. Design intelligent, or because of a pattern, it's intrinsic. The state of wisdom is infinite. And if the tip of a penis dipped in oceans of reservoirs that are limitless, but write a manuscript, you still couldn't extinguish it. Feel the rhythms of the algorithmic. Divine as his mind is balancing the Tao and physics and consciousness is existence that postulates possibilities endless. Oscillating between the force with Memphis, we contemplating sort of beginnings, dying and higher. Alpha and Omega, looking for truth is found in the Vedas of Johnson. Time I found in the shade of the Bodhi tree of the potency in the poetry is from on the level of what posing speak. Decipher rules and fulfillment flowing. A second human omic that you know is looking like it's perhaps a human. Cannot count this Quran super or the Buddha's super in a cycle with shooters. My ancestors look like Buddhist mudras. They try to knock the hustle, they can't knock the Google. They off that Google do with dogs out like Count Dooku. I'm making Google on the steps of pyramid Kufu. I'm in your Google, keep on spitting out this black voodoo. Traditions we carry from ancient. Amir get a perspective, trying to explain what our places are complicated. The arrangement of colored pieces, the language is animals, minerals, molecular matrix, heaven and hell reincarnation. It's all signs of the same conversation. The real question is an evolution and elevation. Is it really the fit who survive in the soul and mind is stuck in stagnation? It's high technology but impotent moral interpretations. We ignore suffering by changing the station or playing with applications on a smart mobile device. Thousands in the social network, but you can't socialize. The food you see clothing that come and move the womb from your eyes. Heavy streets, what we know, we got a spoon full of lies. Tradition says the ways in the heart, it's not in the sky. Tradition says the ways in the heart, it's not in the sky. Tradition says the ways in the heart, it's not in the sky. Tradition says the ways in the heart, it's not in the sky. Sure. Carry on tradition. You hear the carry on tradition. The proper insight, the God is trying to carry on tradition. The proper insight, the God is trying to carry on tradition. When man becomes possessor of the knowledge of himself, he becomes master of his environment, the captain of his own ship, the director of his own destiny, the accomplisher of his own end. Trying to carry on tradition, trying to carry on tradition, trying to carry on tradition.
الحمد لله رب العالمين وبسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمد رسول الله. Let me see, I can carry on the Zoom. Let's see. What are we doing, y'all? Okay, here we go. Let's go back to share. I think we're all on, are we? Yes. All right. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim wa shahadu an la ilaha illallah wa shahadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah. Alhamdulillah, we are grateful to be back again, and as always, Tyson's presentations are enthralling. This morning addressed us on Marcus Mosiah Garvey to get us started, and inshallah we'll get more of that next week, inshallah. So we're grateful for that. For those of you who are with us live on Facebook, crazy thing. So my Facebook on the iPad, they tell me I've been blocked for community, whatever violation. So I'm gonna keep hunting for these autonomous, independent, less censorable platforms, but that's another story for another time. What we're doing today, we're continuing, inshallah. We'll see if this turns out to be the last segment. I thought last week was going to be the last segment on the word work of Imam W.D. Mohammed. However, once I started working on what I thought was going to be a different presentation, turns out, nah, you still got more to do on this. And so this is the last section. Whether this will be the last day or not, the presentation does have a conclusion for Imam Muhammad. Then we go to, okay, what happens in consequence of that, which would be essentially understanding what we mean in this placard when we always post up the Renaissance, right? We haven't talked about that yet. So we're going to get to that. So I just had to get past these initial comments here. So let's go. Continuing on the word work of Imam W.D. Muhammad. What is it? So we're going to speak to Imam W.D. Muhammad's linguistic transformation, liberating the nation of Islam through language. That's what this portion of it is. No, why this? Okay. All right. So he wants to have fun with me today. Okay, there's an image that actually should be here. It's not. Okay, so it is what it is. How Imam Muhammad was able to build a bridge language to freedom for the nation of Islam. He leveraged a deep understanding of African American history, specifically their ongoing efforts in the freedom movement to reclaim their cultural and human identity. He acknowledged Professor Farad's keen insight into the struggle and the strategy he used in conjunction with those insights to construct the Nation of Islam. He unraveled the complex symbolism used by Professor Farad, which held the keys to the gravity of the mystical maze of the nation's teaching. With this knowledge, Imam Muhammad developed a bridge language which resonated with the unique psychological and historical experiences of African Americans affected by and or all of these factors, especially the work of Professor Farad. So I'm starting to feel real conspiratorial here. Hold on for a second, because I haven't been having these issues. Why am I having these issues now? I'm not doing anything different. Let's see. I have no bells and whistles that shouldn't be on. Let's see. All right. Okay. So yeah. I don't know what's happening here. Let me stop this share right now. Okay. That's really something. I don't know. Sometimes Sometimes you think, well, we couldn't be that important for him to just keep messing with me. But then again, maybe we are, because I haven't done anything. I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do but just see what is the deal here. Okay. Let me quit this. I'm trying to restart this because, again, like I'm saying to you, I haven't done anything new or different, and that's really one of the ways that I try to preserve myself by not doing anything new or different. Don't move nothing, and so sorry, those of you live, we're trying to get straight on presentation. So it seems that the Zoom share is changing my PowerPoint presentation. And I'm trying to get it to not do that, basically. Okay, looks like things are, okay, looks like I'm gonna have to leave it this way. I don't like to show the material on the side while I present. So let me just go ahead and just reduce that and see if we can get through. All right. All right. All right. So thank you again. Take two. Imam W.D. Muhammad's linguistic transformation, liberating the nation of Islam through language. Okay. So Imam Muhammad faced a critical challenge to overcome the oppressive, race-based symbolic language ingrained in the Nation of Islam by promoting a universal human language. This was vital for the true liberation of its members. Obviously, we can't go back over all the history that we've traveled so far, but the idea is that the passing of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the coming of Imam W.D. Muhammad into the leadership position of the Nation of Islam, that was just the beginning. And so we ended last week's portion just explaining, okay, who was in the audience that Imam Muhammad was addressing, not just literally there in Chicago, but the Nation of Islam. Who were these people? So we elaborated on what had constructed their minds, why their minds were constructed in the way that it was. But now it's time to bring about a correction, to bring about a transformation in that group of people. That was the work that Imam Muhammad started with. That was the problem that he was faced with. That was the job that he had to do. And Imam Muhammad had to work in a way that would bring about the kind of change. So all of what we're saying right now is about how he brought about that change, basically starting this conversation, sort of like starting from February 26, 1975, all before we've been talking essentially about, what made, where the Nation of Islam came from, where Farad Muhammad drew from, how Elijah Muhammad followed on that, and at a point, he himself also transformed that emphasis, or he changed the emphasis of what Farad had brought, and this especially after himself having gone to Mecca 1959. When he returned, it was a whole different emphasis. Okay, so fast forward from that 1959 Nation of Islam to the 1975 coming of Imam W.D. Muhammad. Now Imam Muhammad has to start a brand new, fresh work with these people after the passing of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who none expected to die before the mothership came and this world was destroyed according to the doctrine of the Nation of Islam. So this was this transformation and the movement was vital for the true liberation of his members, meaning that the job is not done. There's another job that that has to be done in order to continue to benefit from what has transpired thus far. So what Imam Muhammad had to bring it for that liberation was the cure for the cure. That is, we thought that for Muhammad, he had brought the cure. Yes, and he did bring a cure that was partially effective on those people who were the products and the descendants of the products of the chattel slave system. So there was a further work that needed to be done in order to really get to the goal. And this was what Imam Muhammad was bringing. It was the cure for the cure. The Imam's transformation work also faced heavy scrutiny and criticism from outsiders who hadn't and couldn't grasp the complexity of the profound remediation needed. However, Imam Muhammad understood the deep, sophisticated process required to transition those followers from their mythological doctrines to authentic Islamic teachings. This is really what I gotta slow myself down, because I get excited every time when I hear the clarity of, look, man, this is a problem like no other problem. This is an issue like no other issue in history. And Imam Muhammad was the one who was the one to bring about this transformation. So this is sort of a statement of the problem. That is to say, what did Imam Muhammad have to do to be successful? Imam Muhammad, he understood the deep, sophisticated process required to, one, transition the followers from their mythological doctrines to authentic Islamic teachings. Two, while at the same time, I'm adding words, while at the same time preserving the gains of identity and independent thinking that were born of the strategy of the Nation of Islam, i.e., you don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. It's like, okay, yes, mythological teaching. Yes, it had the effect of having this quote unquote artificial stimulant, cathartic effect, bring about changes, erasure of those things that had been put upon them as Negroes through the experimental clinic. Okay, yeah, we had to fix that, but all of it is not to be kept, but also all of it is not to be thrown away. And that's where the surgical qualities of what Imam Muhammad's work had in mind. Okay, so that's two, right? You got to get to the authentic teaching of Islam, but you also have to hold on to the gains of the identity and independent thinking. Then consequently, in order to accomplish this, Imam Muhammad strategically used familiar concepts. That is, a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Strategically used familiar concepts to create a bridge language, which eventually led the sincere followers of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad to authentic freedom. It's like you're not free. You're partially free. Yeah, you have some idea of your identity. You have some idea of the authentic al-Islam, right? But you don't have it all. I'm here to bring you the rest. Effectively, that's what Imam Muhammad did. So Imam Muhammad's transformative use of language enabled the Nation of Islam to transition from the spiritual, emotionally focused group from a spiritual, emotionally focused group to one with a broader understanding of human interactions and social integration, right? The language that was applied to us, and we were a separatist group. We were a separatist group. It's like we were separate from everybody for as that is concerned. Most of the separatism, the thought is that we're separating ourselves from white people. But the idea, no, we were in another cocoon, another womb, another setup, an environment that was separated from all the other society structures. So the Imam moved us from a spiritually, emotionally focused group to one with a broader understanding of human interactions and social integration through strategic linguistic changes. He liberated the Nation of Islam from its ideological constraints. Okay. His approach was another genetic capacitation that replaced these words. I have to use these words because these were the words that really describe the technical, scientific, forensic uh, uh, actions that Imam Muhammad had to take, and that through language. Okay. He was operating upon a very scientific basis. But the beautiful thing is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given him a language, a skill set. And in part, it's almost like Allah restrained him from the quote unquote, the big words, all right, for the benefit of the people that he's speaking to, because that was not their language. So he had to be able to take high language and bring it down to common language without losing the ideas in the high language, okay? So all of this work that the Imam instituted, the strategical linguistic changes, it was another approach that brought about another genetic capacitation, which replaced the deleterious mutant alleles. This is just a description of what's in the DNA. These are real. We talked about this, and I make the reference here, so let me tell you. Those of you can go to masterworthing.org, and those who are watching us on Facebook Live, if you want to see the slides that we're using, then you go to masterworthing.org and click on the Rise tab, and you'll get to the screen that I'm reading from there. But also on the website, masterworthing.org, we have the archives of all the presentations that have led up to this point that began in Ramadan this year. So to understand, when we fully expressed and we fully detail the idea of the genetic capacitation that happened with the coming of the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had ordered things, we talk about the robbery, which has to do with the deprivation of the chattel slave of all those things that make them human, i.e. the dehumanization, and then the redemption by nature. We say redemption by nature. We used the experiment in 1988 of Dr. John Cairns that showed how Allah has designed in the nature of creation and in the way that mutations are actually brought about to restore lost capacities in organic life under stress. So I'm not going to go any further than that. So you want to get the details of what I'm saying, because what I'm saying is that Imam Muhammad did, when he came to do what he did the same thing, but on another level, as was done by nature and as was done by design by Farad Muhammad. And now he had to come, Imam Muhammad had to come and similarly enact and implement a strategy to bring about a further change, to continue the transformation, to continue the restoration, to continue the rehumanization of the people who have been a part of that whole process. All right. So it's happening again, February 26, 1975. It's happening again, a genetic capacitation that happens, and we give you the science of this. This is not rhetoric that we're talking about. This is the scientific fact. So go back, look at that. You can get the details if you haven't seen that portion before. Some of you have been with us all the way, so you remember I was speaking of that. So what I'm bringing to your mind right now is that it's happening all over again. And understand this. This is where we get another representation of understanding. Allah created you in the wombs of your mothers through 3 veils of darkness. So there's a darkness in the plantation, there's a darkness in the Nation of Islam, and there's a darkness in terms of the mystery or the insights that were brought about again by Imam W.D. Muhammad, and then the new creatures coming out of that. That's the Renaissance. That's the rebirth. And it's already happened. I'm looking backwards. It's already happened. But let's go on. So the Imam is doing it all over again. He is replacing the deleterious mutant alleles instantiated in the descendants of, instantiated meaning that by in consequence of what we had experienced at that time, there was a change that took place genetically in us, and it became a part of us. And in order to transform that, another kind of mutation had to happen, which the mutation is a correction of the correction. And that is what Imam Muhammad did in terms of further advancing the transformation that had begun in the Nation of Islam. I have to move on. So he replaced the deleterious mutant alleles instantiated in the descendants of the victims of the experimental clinic, i.e. ex-Negroes, with beneficial ones. That is, a certain kind of replacement took place under the Nation of Islam. Okay, now another type of replacement has to take place post Nation of Islam, because what was needed at the time of the Nation of Islam was no longer needed after the desired effect of the Nation of Islam had taken hold, and the one competent and capable and intended to move to the next phase is there and present, and the previous leadership is gone. Okay, now it's time for the next phase, which was Imam W.D. Muhammad, February 26, 1975. And it's by this ultimately leads to their successful reintegration and deeper participation in mainstream society. Can't you see that the separatism and the apolitical posture of us as the Nation of Islam, and Imam Muhammad coming in as he did, with the perception that he had, with the vision that he had, with the path to engagement and involvement and leadership and participation in the normal world. That's what he called it when he said, my goal was to get you into a position to take you out of the boundaries that you were in and to bring you into the normal world. But again, he had to bring us into that world intact. It's not just about, okay, assimilate. No, he said, take the benefit of what has transpired in your life and the transformation that has taken place in you, and get the benefit of that, and now understand it and apply it in the world as it is right now, but with and through and upon the new formulation that has occurred in you. You're not throwing away the benefits of what you've come through. You're taking the developments that come by virtue of what you've been through, and now you're applying it in mainstream society, but doing so upon an original human identity and independent thought. I really want us to, you really need to understand that, man. I mean, because there are those who, all we need now is the Quran and the Sunnah. We think Allah, the Imam, brought us to the Quran and Sunnah. Okay, it's like we'll take it from here. No, you need to understand why what happened. What was the intended product of what happened, and how does that development apply to and is to be understood in the society as it exists right now. Otherwise, like what about, I'm sorry, I don't have the brother's name. Somebody knows him. And I thank Allah for the work, So you move from the back of the bus to the back of the camel. So if you think that all I gotta do is follow Quran Sunnah, then you're gonna wind up, mashallah, look, it is what it is, man. You're gonna wind up put on a turban, wind up put on a thobe, and yani, and you think that we have arrived. And I'm talking about even those who came through the Nation of Islam, FOI, in the ranks, standing posts, et cetera, and now it's like that never happened. It's like, what? So I gotta woosah, I gotta calm down. Because it's like, no, you missed the boat. You didn't get the right understanding of what all that was about. So in any case, so the point is the reintegration, to use that term in quotes, into mainstream society was to be upon and is to be upon an original human identity, not an artificial substitute, costume-driven identity. No, you, who are you as created by Allah, right? And who does your thinking? Are you thinking for yourself? Not just to be different or rebellious or I just don't, whatever he say, I say the opposite. I don't know what he said. Okay, I say the opposite. No, that's not independent thinking. The capacity to be able to listen to what other people are thinking, to understand what other people are thinking, and to craft to have an understanding of your own, whether it agrees with or disagrees with it. If I agree with you, it don't mean I don't have independent thought. I just agree with what you say. Similarly, if I disagree with you, it doesn't mean that I'm just simply rejecting you and being dogmatic. If my thinking is grounded on a reasoning process and a doctrine or ideology that I have, or a thought style that frames my way of reasoning, that's just me, right? Okay, so all of us, okay, I'm sure we have some followers of Imam W.D. Mohammed that are Republicans, and I'm sure we have some that are Democrats. So we have some that are independents. We have some that say, I don't even mess with the system. Independent thought, mashallah. But we're not successful unless we engage the mainstream society upon, yes, al-Islam, but yes, upon our original human identity, one that we can truly say, this is who I am. Right? And it's not an imitation of someone who I think is an authentic Muslim. Okay? And upon independent thought, carrying on. This unique linguistic strategy distinguished Imam Muhammad's mission from other Islamic movements as he viewed language as a living entity. We're really gonna get this, and inshallah, we'll continue because it's just so huge. If you don't get it now, if you don't, it's like you hear the emphasis, you hear it said, you hear it stated, but if you still don't feel like you got it, just keep hanging in there, keep reflecting, going back and understanding. But language is a real thing. It is a powerful thing. Think about some of the things that the Quran says, where it speaks of, where it says, among its signs is that you speak to each other clearly. And he talks about, I gave you your languages, So the language, Ar-Rahman allama al-Quran, khalaqa al-insan allamahu al-bayan. All of these statements about language are statements that God is telling us that language is a sacred phenomenon, right? But carrying on, this unique linguistic strategy distinguished Imam Muhammad's mission from other Islamic movements. That's another important thing. It's his language. Some people can only hear when we use that word language, they just think, okay, well, he speaks English, he does speak Arabic. No, that's not the language that we're talking about. All right. We're going to keep going. So he viewed language as a living entity capable of shaping and evolving communal perceptions and beliefs. So these little phrases that we have right here, man is mind, woman is womb of mind, words make people, these were powerful, first heard phrasings that no, you really hadn't heard that before until he said it. Man is mine and woman is womb of mine. That was like, whoa, what? And it was true, and it still is true. But these were some of the early phrasings and language that Imam Muhammad gave us to start bridging us out of the clinic of Farad Muhammad, which we had come into out of the experimental clinic of chattel slavery and its effects on its descendants. So Imam Muhammad states, he says, I have studied the past for many years now. I've studied it and I have been prepared to study it. Nothing spooky. I've been prepared as a young man to study it. And I've done that. And I was sincere and innocent. I had no prejudice. I had no personal thing handicapping me. I believe that God favored me and his mercy. So, pardon me with his mercy, so that I would be completely objective. Objective means giving everything its fair due. That's one quick example of how Imam Muhammad is like big words. People objectivity versus subjectivity, etc. So the term objective can be made into a sophistic kind of word or college word, as I sometimes say. But the Imam said, look, don't get confused. Don't worry about it. Don't be afraid of this word. This word objective, all it means is giving everything its fair due. Done. That's an example of Imam Muhammad's language, where he takes things that are sometimes made more complicated than they need to be, and also, though they have valuable knowledge, most times the vocabulary of people who have not been educated in those matters, they'll miss it if someone doesn't put it into terms that they can understand. And so the Imam, this word right here, objective, means giving everything its fair due. I've done that, and I believe that there is not a man on earth or a human being on this earth or a non-human being on this earth that has a better grasp, perception, or understanding of what the Nation of Islam under the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was than I do. That's a powerful claim and totally justified. And this is from an Imam's meeting in November 1998 in Chicago. So as regards the particular symbolic language of the Nation of Islam, the Imam elaborated on the effects of Professor Farad's strategy and his father's teaching on his way of being. In Charleston, South Carolina, February 26, 2002, he said this: when I read where his teacher, meaning the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's teacher, where his teacher said, to speak well, you must learn how to use the terms properly, I asked myself, what does that mean? Yes, he wants you to speak. Speak to who? To speak to the public. But you can't speak well to that public until you learn how to put the terms that he uses in the proper places. When I read that, I was encouraged. Then I was searching with more enthusiasm because I believed then that if I could break the code of this language, then I could use these terms properly and I would be successful when I spoke. That is what he said, and that is what I followed, and I am successful. Again, I want to say to those of you who are watching us live on Facebook, if you want to see the slides that we're reading from, you can go to masterworthy.org and click on the Rise link there, and you'll be brought into the Zoom presentation. And that's where you can get it every week. I just use this live side because there's another side for people can get it immediately. Later on, sometime tomorrow, we'll post up this. But moving on to the next phase here. So Imam Muhammad leveraged a deep understanding of the African American history. Listen to all these are all components that have to be respected in order to successfully achieve for the victims of the experimental clinic, in order for them to be fully restored to what they were robbed of and what they were deprived of. So what was necessary? A deep understanding of African American history, especially their ongoing efforts in the freedom movement. This is why we're really, really grateful of the work that Tyson brings to this whole project, because in his carry-on tradition, he covers the rich and often absent profiles of those leaders of the freedom movement historically, of which we are a continuation. So specifically, their ongoing efforts in the freedom movement to reclaim their cultural and human identity. He acknowledged Professor Farad's keen insight into that struggle. That's something that needs to be known. And the strategy that he used, that is Farad, used in conjunction with those insights to construct the Nation of Islam. The Imam Muhammad had the science of all of these things. The science of African American history, how it relates, the connection between the freedom, the movement, and what its efforts were for the reclamation of our cultural and human identity. Also, Farad Muhammad's insight, his strategies as well, in conjunction with that work. And Imam Muhammad unraveled the complex symbolism used by, see, Professor Farad, he didn't give a straightforward, like we talk about Booker T. Washington, we talk about Marcus Garvey, we talk about the other works inside the freedom movement that had institutions that were born from them. Well, they were not cryptic. They were very straightforward, very, very direct about concretely what they had to do. Farad's work was a work that was working on the interior, not just the exterior, the external conditions, the social, the economic, political conditions of this people who were subject to experimental clinic. Farad was working on what had been let's call it destroyed and undermined. Well, the Imam said it best. The Imam said it was an experimental clinic designed to cause us to dysfunction in the vital areas of our lives. So when we talk about vital areas of our life, then we talk about vital organs. So Farad was working on the vital organs of our humanity that had been deformed and deprived and destroyed. That internal reconstruction was what Farad's work was intended to do. And therefore it was cryptic, it was mystical, it was spiritual, it was psychological, it was intricate, and that's the work that all the external stuff, what again, we talked about Tuskegee Institute, we talked about Marcus Garvey, UNIA, and etc. And the Nation of Islam, and in its externality, was a repetition and an amalgamation and a reiteration of many of those things in a composite form. But that was not the prime work of Farad Muhammad. The prime work of Farad Muhammad was the internal organs of the humanity of those people, which has to do with identity, independent thinking, the quote unquote, the correctness of their relationship with God and creation. That work was the work of Farad, but he had put it in symbolic language. So Imam Muhammad had to unravel the complex symbolism used by Farad. You talk about Rubik's Cube, man. This was a puzzle that by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Imam did it absolutely well. We thank Allah for it. He unraveled the complex symbolism used by Professor Farad, which held the keys to the gravity of the mystical maze of the Nation of Islam. Listen, Imam Muhammad said that that Farad created a mystical maze, a moral a maze, which the only way out was the moral route. And if you did not have the right moral disposition, you would not find your way out of that maze. Come on now. Come on now. If you had the wrong moral disposition, you didn't want to leave that because you needed that element in it that allowed you to quote unquote be and feel some kind of way that didn't call for universal morality and true Islamic morality and true relationship to the creator of the heavens and the earth. No, you wanted a strategy to serve some other, I'm going to call it prurient interest. No, I ain't leaving this. This is the thing that this is what it's got to do. This is now, well, you're not trying to really be what Allah created you to be and follow the path that Allah laid out for all humanity, for all time, and that the noble lie that was told to us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He allowed it, He favored it, and He provided an opening for those who wanted a way out. But if you didn't want a way out, no, I'm good. I'm gonna stick with this. It is what it is. So he unraveled the complex symbolism used by Professor Farad, which held the keys to the gravity of the mystical maze of the nation's teaching. With this knowledge, Imam Muhammad developed a bridge language which resonated with the unique, I really hope you're getting what kind of surgical, strategic, forensic work that Imam Muhammad had to do on the internal psychological, spiritual, moral, intellectual organs of these people. So he developed a bridge language which resonated with the unique psychological and historical experiences of African Americans affected by any or all of these factors, especially the work of Farad Muhammad. There's an analogy that I used to use, and I'm gonna go ahead and make it stated right here so you understand. You've heard of the jaws of life, right? The jaws of life, right? If there's been this big, tragic, complicated accident, but then individuals are in that pile of rubble. This is just for analogy's sake. And so there's an alive person. They're alive in that, but the wreckage is so complicated and this twisted metal there. And if you go in the wrong way, or if you go in too fast, or if you go in without respect for the position and the orientation of the body in relationship to the wreckage, then you're going to kill the person while you're trying to save him. So Imam Muhammad, I say, it's like the jaws of life, where you have to have something big enough, powerful enough to break through those twisted, those forceful and powerful twisted bits of metal, so as to create an opening to save the person from the wreckage without killing them. That's what Imam Muhammad had to do with the Nation of Islam, such as it was. That the things were so complicated and convoluted. When you really understood what was going on, somebody needed to explain. Somebody needed to separate the sugar from the salt. And then you imagine how hard that really is. You got salt, you got sugar. And somebody, it's like, okay, now separate the salt from the sugar. It's like, I mean, what kind of science you need to be able to do that? Okay.